Now, I'm delighted to say that for the very first time in the Independent Republic, we have Katharine Birbalsingh. Katharine, welcome.
Thank you for having me.
Thank you so much for coming in. We've got so much to talk about, really. And the thing I like about it is that it won't be COVID related. It won't have anything to do with COP26. And it will be something completely different that we could actually charm the listeners with. Because you have been somebody that I've long admired for a very long time, since we started talking to you just about schooling and about what the education system was like. You've since, of course, been appointed as a social mobility sort of caretaker, if you like, for the government. Tell us a little bit about how that happened and what you do for them.
Yeah, well, I mean, it's only just started, but the idea of the Social Mobility Commission is that one kind of gives advice to government on things that one might think would help enable social mobility in the country. And there's a team of people who can do some research and analysis of various different issues, and I'll help push them in the right directions as I might see it, really.
Because I wonder whether we are at a point in our sort of societal history where social mobility is pretty low at the moment. You know, when I was growing up a long time ago, and we became of age kind of in the 1980s, my sister and I, both at the same time. She ended up going to work in the city, which until then had been very much the place where only stockbrokers' sons could go and work. But suddenly Big Bang happened. She got a job, did very well. I went and worked in America. The world seemed to be our oyster. It doesn't feel like that's the case now for kids coming out of college or coming out of school.
Well, I'm not sure that's the case, actually. My feeling is that, in fact, social mobility is far better now than people tend to think. And that's the sort of thing that we can look at with the Commission and do some analysis to see whether or not my kind of instinct on that is true.
Yeah.
But wherever it is, however good or bad it is, obviously we want it to get better. And that's what's key. And the things that I'd like to look at really are, a big thing is education, obviously. I think that schools make a massive difference to children in terms of what they're going to be able to do with their lives and how many doors will be open to them. I want to look at the routes into work at the other end of school, you know, apprenticeships and so on. We can go some way, I think, as a country to help in that area, because it's much more complex than I think people might realise.
Yes. I mean, I happen to think, and it may be a simplistic view, that there's too many teenagers going to university and just deciding they'll go there because they should. Again, when I was younger, not very many people went to university. An awful lot of people just went to learn either a trade or got into a business at a younger age, and you could get into the city or you could get into journalism. I mean, it's really hard to even get into this building if you haven't got a degree. And I think we're hoping to change that. We're trying to change that.
Yes. Well, I mean, and you make a good point that I do think sometimes there are students who end up doing degrees that they perhaps didn't have to do. And if there were other routes into the workplace that would enable them to get various jobs and work their way up, as it were, they might have been better off. And so I am interested in that. I'm also interested in what families can do for themselves, you know, at home in terms of enabling social mobility. I mean, on the one hand, there is the government, and that's great. And we want to make sure that the government is doing the right things. But I also think we as people need to do what we can to give ourselves the best chances at life.
Yes, because I think the worry that some people have is that there are pockets of this country where the poor remain poor, and for generations they don't really change anything about that. And we know that individuals can obviously shine and sometimes can come from the very poorest circumstances and do well. But what should we be doing differently, do you think, in terms of, I mean, levelling up is the phrase the government uses. I'm not sure anyone really knows what that means.
Well, it's an interesting point that you make about individuals, because there are some individuals who manage to change things for themselves and some others that don't. And then we need to, I think it'd be good to look at why. Why is that the case?
Right.
And a lot of it has to do, I think, with education, and in particular education before children even get to school. And a big thing for me, for instance, is screen time, smartphones, and how that can destroy children's abilities. So you give a toddler a smartphone, and then when you're trying to teach them to read later on, the book finds it really hard to compete with the smartphone, because it's flat and black and white. Smartphone has lots of colors and explosions and so on. And then the parent thinks, oh, well, actually, he just never really liked reading. But the reality is, if you hadn't given him the smartphone, that might not have happened. And so I would love to see more campaigns to inform families of what kind of works with children in terms of helping them make the most of their abilities.
Yes, I think that's true. I think many parents would probably say, in their own defence, well, we gave them an iPad to play with at the restaurant because it stopped them from being a nuisance, effectively. It's easy, isn't it?
Yes. No, exactly. Well, sometimes it's easy, but also I don't know if people realise the damage that they might be doing. And that's the kind, and because it's so new, all of this technology is so new, and then eventually you get to a point where you can't take, the smartphone away. Children go on hunger strike, and they say they're leaving home and all sorts, and I'm not exaggerating, it's the kind of thing they do because they're so addicted.
Yeah.
And people don't realise that the Instagram, Snapchat, all of them, they have teams of people hired, addiction teams, to make the app more addictive, and
quite
it's
insidious,
horrifying.
that, isn't
it is. It's awful. And what we also don't realize is that the big tech CEOs in California, they don't give their children these screens. They protect their own children.
Do they?
Oh yeah. I mean, Steve Jobs, when he was interviewed in 2010 about the new iPad coming out, was asked what his children thought of the iPad, and he said, "Well, obviously, I wouldn't give my children the iPad. Why would I do that?"
Yeah.
And the rest of us, of course, imagine that his house is filled with phones and iPads.
Right.
It's not the case at all.
Yeah.
So the people who know, there's a wonderful film on Netflix called The Social Dilemma, which I would suggest all your viewers watch.
Okay.
It will scare the pants off you, and
Right.
will make sure you take those phones out of your toddler's hands.
Wow. And what about in your school then? Do you have a no phone policy? Do you use computers in any way, shape or form, like in terms of creative
So
uses?
we will use computers, but phones are not allowed on the premises. But we go further than that. We do a lot of work with families to get the children to not have smartphones even at home. We sell brick phones so that the parent can still have the accessibility to their child, be able to phone them and text them, but they don't have unsupervised access to the internet, which is just so important, especially for the older children, who then get involved with all kinds of people who you would not want your child to be involved with.
Yeah.
And the problem is you don't actually know that that's what's happening because they're doing it privately on their phone, and you have no idea.
And I worry as well about the sort of stuff that goes on once the children become sort of adolescents and they get to become 12, 13, 14 years of age, and the way they interact with each other on the internet and on Snapchat and stuff, and the kinds of things that pictures they exchange and all of that.
Exactly.
It's a very unhealthy world, isn't it?
Well, and it's a kind of spiral downwards. The language that they use, the kind of a behavior that then comes from that, it normalizes aggressive, angry kind of behavior. Now, it doesn't mean that all children do this, but you are putting your child at risk when they have unsupervised access to the internet because you don't know what they're doing. Not only that, but it destroys family time. It's very individual. You're just on your own. The thing about TV, while I'm not the biggest fan of television and children, I'd rather they did their homework, obviously. At least with the television, you sit around as a family and you can watch together.
Yeah.
With the phone, it actually breaks families apart. And I think in 50, 60 years' time, all of this will be very well known and we'll all have lots of books on this sort of thing.
Yeah,
It's
I mean,
just
I've
that it's
spoken
new.
to sort of parental guidance counsellors and things who say, they have a basket at the front door, and whoever comes home, they drop the phone in the basket and they don't use it again until they go back out again.
Great idea.
But it's easy to say, though, but is it easy to do? I mean,
Very
do you
hard.
how do you get the success rates that you get with parents?
Well, we have a digital detox system at school where the children can voluntarily drop their phones off, and they can drop them for 2 days, 3 days. When they're coming up towards the GCSE exams, the children will drop them there for several weeks, if not months at a time. And people are kind of astonished by this, but because we're constantly talking about it, the culture at Michaela is very much one of don't break your brain, spend your time on your homework, do this for yourself. Our sixth formers, again, they just they're able to drop the phone off and then concentrate on their A levels. And it's great if you get the buy-in from the kids. And what parents really like is having that support from the school. Sometimes I think parents can be frustrated. Friends of mine, if I say, take the phone away from your child, and they say, yeah, but the school is asking us to use the phone. The school is asking us. And so I do think schools and parents, all of us, have a part to play in here to try and help them be the best version of themselves that they can be. And that's the thing that I really want to be. Everybody has a certain ability level. Well, are we actually reaching those ability levels?
Yes. And are all children being given those opportunities? Because in the end, it's all about opportunities. Because, of course, I mean, I always say to people, I went to grammar school when I was younger, and it's very difficult now to find grammar schools, apart from in Kent and Lancashire, I think. You a fan of grammar schools or not really?
I don't have anything against them. I mean, there are a couple of grammar schools near us. So actually, in many ways, we're secondary modern because those kids go off. Our children haven't, passed the 11 plus. I'm not against them.
No, but there are some educators who don't think that the exam regimens that we have are good for kids, that they put too much pressure on them. I mean, I think exams are a good thing. I don't know what you think has happened to the education system in the last 2 years, because clearly so many schools have been closed for such a long period of time. It's been very difficult. How did you manage that?
Yeah, well, we did our Zoom lessons and we gave phone calls home and we did lots and lots to support the children. But it doesn't really matter, because nothing can replace a good teacher in a classroom. Children need their teachers with them, holding them to account. And when I say holding them to account, you're able to test for learning right away in the classroom. Have they got it? Have they not? Oh, I'm going to reteach that. When you're on Zoom, that's impossible. Yeah. And you have no idea whether or not they're actually taking on board what you're teaching them. So huge losses happened over the pandemic, in particular for disadvantaged children, because obviously if you have... If you have a situation at home which can be more able to get you on top of the work and can support you, if the family doesn't speak English, well, very difficult. There are all kinds of things that will hold disadvantaged children back. But my position right now is we can all catch up. We can all work hard. If we were to take away screen time from kids and get the behavior right in our schools across the country, you'd be amazed at how quickly everybody would catch up.
Yeah, right. And interestingly, you've spoken before about the one of the things that disadvantaged children don't need is to be told they're disadvantaged constantly, or to be told that they're somehow worse off and they've got less chance and they'll never get anywhere.
Yes, that's absolutely the case. My position is, look, progressives like to talk about the obstacles in life, like racism and sexism and so on, and they may very well exist. I'm almost not interested. I mean, what's important to me is, are we maximizing our opportunities? Are we making sure we're taking personal responsibility so that we can deliver when we're in our lessons, so that we can deliver on those exam papers? I too believe very much in exams. It can show... It gives children something to work towards, and it helps them hone those abilities. I feel really sorry for the exam groups, both GCSE and A-level, who went through over the pandemic, because they didn't really have those national exams that they could work towards. And it means then that later in life, you learn stuff about yourself, how you learn, how to make sure, when do you work best, how do you keep on top of things, where do you get that resilience from, how do you get the motivation to keep going when you're down, all of that stuff is what makes people successful.
Sure. And how you handle the stress of worrying about it as well, because if you don't have any stress as a child or as a teenager, you won't know what to do. And I think that's what we suffer from right now. I know an awful lot of young people who can't handle it. They just can't handle anything.
Yes, and of course that comes from a very young age. And I think too often progressives can argue against exams, certainly when they're younger in year 1 and 2 and so on. They say, no, we shouldn't be testing children. But the fact is that in the private sector, children are tested all the time. They're at 7+, 8+, 11, 13. They've got these exams to get into various schools. So that means by the time they get to GCSE at 16, well, this is old
just
play. They
test.
know, they've done it so many times before. And so I don't think we're helping anybody to protect them from these tests, because the fact is, in life there are loads and loads of tests, and if you don't deliver that talk to the board in the way that you're meant to, well, they'll fire you. And so at school, what's great about school, it's your opportunity to be able to fail and then pick yourself up, fail again, pick yourself up, and to learn how to build that resilience so that later in life you can succeed. You fail now, you succeed later. But if you're protected all the time now, then you won't succeed later. And our job as teachers and as parents is to build them up, get that confidence. And how do you get that confidence? By succeeding at the various things you're doing. And you succeed by failing, picking yourself up, keep on going, and so on.
And by taking chances, because a lot of people, again, are not prepared to do that on the grounds that they're worried they might fail. And you go, well, I've always been asked that question, aren't you worried? I used to be in newspapers, and when I got into radio, people were like, how do you know you're not going to fail at radio? And I went, well, I just don't think I am. I don't know. I'll just have a go, see how it goes. It's going all right. It's going quite well, in fact. But, as parents, we're always wondering what we should be doing more. There's always more that you can do.
Yes.
But at the same time, my 2 boys now, the younger 2 are 17 and 14, so they don't really want to see much of me at all at this point. And it's actually quite a struggle to get them to do anything with the rest of the family.
Yes.
But at the same time, I don't want to make them do that, and I want them to kind of branch out. I mean, during lockdown at one point, I actually said to the 17-year-old, why don't you go out and hang around on the street corner and drink some cider or something like you're supposed to? And he laughed at it because he hadn't been out. Because he started,
Yes.
I think the lockdown's been really hard for a lot of families and a lot of kids.
Yes, no, absolutely. Well, you're just saying you want them to be kind of normal. They're
Yeah.
going out and doing normal things and just behaving.
And getting into a little bit of
Yes.
trouble because that's what you expect them to do.
Yes.
But I mean, overall, you just want them to be happy.
Yes, well, indeed.
You
But
know.
happiness is an interesting thing, and I think if you make happiness your goal, actually, ironically, that can actually undermine them being happy. What you want is for them to be successful at the various things that they're trying to do. You know, young parents, get them on. When I say with young kids, you know, get them learning an instrument. Put your all into that. That's not because they're going to become a professional pianist later, but because it gives them something to concentrate on and to feel like they've achieved that. Every time they see a piece of music, they think, I can't do that. But by the end, they can. You want to find things. Now, that's the case with all sorts of things. That's just an example. It might be that you get them on some football coaching.
Right.
And again, they think, I can't get the ball around those pylons. But then they keep practicing and then they manage it. You want as many activities like that as possible so that they can know that they feel at the beginning they can't do it, and then at the end they can. And what was the difference? Practice, right? And too often, I think in the West, we think to ourselves, oh, well, I just can't do it. I'm not cut out for that. In the East, they don't think like that. In the East, they think, put the hard work in and you'll get there.
Yes.
And that's something I really want to see more of here with all of us in the West. Really.
No, I think that's an interesting point because I think there is that tendency now for people to talk to their kids as if they are trying to kind of wrap them in cotton wool and make sure that they don't come to any harm and to make sure that they're protected so that nobody... I mean, the whole business of offence that people take nowadays seems to me to be undermining people's happiness as well, because people just take offence all the time. And I was interested in one of your tweets about the truth. Truth has become so inconsequential to some of us that we are moving to a point where we no longer consider it valuable, because it's all about your truth now and my truth as opposed to the truth, right?
Yes, that's right. And
how do you deal with that in school?
Well, actually, I think we do such a great job of getting our kids to understand right from wrong and so on. We don't, you know, they get it. Our kids are so great. You know, you would love them. You need to come and visit the school.
I will.
And in fact, you know, we get over 600 visitors a year visiting the school. They come and have lunch with the kids. They go on a tour, and you'll see lots of really excited children who love learning and who... I think they believe in truth. I mean, it'd be interesting. I'll have to give it one of our lunch topics. I'll have to ask them and see what they think.
Well, maybe we'll come and have a conversation about truth, because, you know, we have a very divided truth now in this country, where we have those who believe that we should have stayed in the European Union, those that think we should have left, those that think that, you know, COVID should be now something that we move on from and carry on further, those who think that climate change is the most important thing we'll ever deal with. And it seems that the polarisation now of everything has driven people insane.
It's true.
Hasn't
There
it?
is a polarisation, and that's a bit of a shame.
Yeah.
I do try hard on my Twitter, actually, to try and speak, you know, to both ends, as it were, and try and make sure that one's thoughts are more nuanced and complex, you know, just because if you find you're always agreeing with one side, maybe you need to just hear what the other side is saying. I think just generally.
But when we hear from politicians and from scientists, well, there's no debate now on this subject. This is the result of what we have decided, and therefore anyone who doesn't agree with it is clearly some kind of basket case that needs to be locked up.
Yeah, and that's the
not
problem.
good.
And I understand ordinary people's frustration when the media classes have got the airwaves and they've got the kind of power, as it were, to kind of to say what's what.
Right.
And they feel like their ordinary views that they think are pretty normal because that's what everybody thinks around them.
Right.
That these people in their positions that, you know, of power are kind of looking down on them.
Yeah.
And I get it. I get the anger. I do.
I do as well. When you get some people that call into our shows who have just got ordinary lives, you know, they've got not very much money, but they've got enough to get by. They're working. They're doing the best for their kids.
Yes.
You know, they don't want to be bombarded all the time with how wrong their lives are and how privileged they are because of the colour of their skin, or how underprivileged they are because of the colour of their skin. I don't want to hear it.
Yes, no, and I get that. Although I am somebody who will bombard quite a lot on how to be a better parent or how to be a better teacher.
Yeah, but as long as it's, I mean, we call ourselves the Home of Common Sense because we like to think that that's what we teach people.
Yes.
It's not ideologically driven.
Yes,
people accuse us of being ideologically driven, but it's driven simply by just common sense. You know, like I said about Boris Johnson, you know, it's travel day. where everybody's supposed to be encouraged not to travel. So all the politicians have travelled to Scotland.
Yeah.
And you go, well, that doesn't make much sense, does it?
No.
It's not really showing a great example to jump on a private jet
Yes.
and telling me not to drive anywhere with my children and make them walk to school.
Yes. No, indeed. And I think that's a really good point about role models, that we adults need to be role models for children.
Right.
And that means that we need to not make ourselves into victims. We need to, when we fall down, pick ourselves up and keep on going. We need to try and take personal responsibility. We need to... Look, I know teenagers are hard, aren't they? I mean,
They
we've
are.
got teenagers.
Yeah.
But I think you need to insist on them sitting around the dinner table.
Oh,
with
we
you.
do.
Oh,
Yeah.
right. Okay,
No,
great.
we definitely
well
do that.
done, you.
Yeah, no, we definitely do that, but
Right.
they can't wait to get away. That's
Well,
that's
that's
not the problem.
fine.
No, we sit them down. We
Right.
make them discuss
Good.
the elements of the day.
Good.
You know, we make them talk.
Good. Well, you
because-
say that as if it's obvious. It's not obvious, right? There are lots of families where that doesn't happen. And that's really, really important because they know you care about them. It's bonding time.
Yeah.
You get to talk about stuff so that they learn about the world. Of course, they're going to scuttle off afterwards. I mean, they're teenagers.
Right.
That's normal, right?
Right.
But great that you have that family time together.
Yes, no, definitely. Well, listen, you're an absolute inspiration, Katherine. I'm so glad you came in. We could talk for hours, but I will come and talk to you some more
Do
at your
come and
school.
visit us. Yes.
If you could give one piece of advice, and this is the hard bit, right? One piece of advice to parents listening to this now, going, what do we do to make our kids better?
Loads and loads of reading, minimal screen time.
Okay, well, that's pretty straightforward. Katharine Birbalsingh, good luck with the government as well, because
Thank you.
that looks like a lot of treacle to clamber through.